The e-tron name has been around for a while now, and in its time, it's done quite a bit of work. It's been on concepts, SUVs, small hatchbacks, plug-in hybrids, full battery electrics, even performance cars, but one of the things it hasn't had is an everyday sedan, at least until now. This is the A6 e-tron Sportback, and if everyday sedan seems a little bit too commonplace for you, good news, this Sportback has an S6 version as well. Right now we're going to take a look at the A6, but if you know it's the S6 you're most interested in or want to look at it later, I'll leave a link in the description below because we've already got a video taking a closer look at the S6 specifically, but there is a lot of carryover. And actually a lot of that has to do with this front end, which very much reminds me more of the e-tron GT than it does any of the other e-tron vehicles up to this point, and that's a good thing because that GT has been the sportiest, honestly the most interesting looking of the bunch, and I'm glad we get a lot of that here, but it also doesn't scream I'm electric. And Audi is working really hard to make sure this is just an everyday sedan that can pull into a parking lot and doesn't have to draw attention in any sort of strange or bizarre way. However, it will probably draw your eye because of the lighting. Now there is a pretty cool lighting signature here, and when I say here, I mean if I wanted to, I can go ahead and change this up to 8 different ways. We do have the Prestige model right now, which means that you can go ahead and cycle between those 8 different profiles, but it's customization in a way that we just don't see in a lot of other vehicles, and honestly it brings a lot of personality to not just this car, but a genre that's not necessarily known for personality, and right now that's been electric vehicles. We also have a front trunk space that, while not enormous, is easily accessible, and in this case can be activated via a motion control. So all you do is swipe your hand in front of it, it'll go ahead and pop open. It is going to be a latch release, but there's just enough room in here for your charging cable if you want to go ahead and have one on the road, or maybe something like an emergency flare or some blankets. Also, you could fit your takeout out in here, but the shape is not really designed to make that easier, and actually that's one of my favorite uses of a front trunk is for takeout or anything that's a little bit smelly that needs to come home with you but you don't want to be experiencing in the car itself. This is the second vehicle Audi has released on their PPE architecture, which, sorry if that's triggering, it has nothing to do with masks or gloves. Instead, it's just the battery electric platform that the Q6 and now the A6 Sportback are built on. And I am going to use sedan and Sportback interchangeable. They are essentially the same thing. But one thing I appreciate about this design is that it's designed to be able to accommodate SUVs as well as sedans. And that's because there's a high floor design and a low floor design. And this is exactly what we get here, is that low floor design, which obviously means we don't want this any higher off the ground than it has to be, especially for someone like me who likes to be nice and low to the ground and really enjoy not just the low center of gravity that comes with a battery electric vehicle, but an even lower center of gravity where it's an extra focus by the manufacturer. What it doesn't do is change much about the body shape, but I will say probably from the windowsill down is where it's a little bit taller than you find in a traditional sedan, though Audi does a really good job of blending that in. If you notice here, there is sort of a black accenting piece. I'd say from about here and below is where you'll find those batteries, but this just seems a little bit tall. The good news is it doesn't change the rest of the silhouette, which I think is brilliant. And the fact that we are moving actually away from a sedan into Sportback is also a good step forward in my eyes because I think they're a little bit better looking. That may be me, just let me know in the comments how far off I am, or if you and I are on the same page with this one. But it's not just better looking, but it's a little bit more practical. No matter which way you order your A6 or your S6, it's going to come with a standard staggered wheel layout. That means thinner up front, a little bit wider in the back, and they're all going to come standard with 20-inch wheels. But you can opt up for a 21 or down for a 19-inch wheel. Now that 19-inch wheel is part of what's called the Ultra package, and Ultra really means ultra range. That 19-inch wheel isn't just a little bit thinner and more aerodynamically designed, it also has a thinner tire. So where 235 is standard up front, we're now moving to 225, and instead of 265s, we're doing 255s in the rear. If you go with the 21-inch wheel over on the S6, not only is that going to give you that bigger wheel and much more of an aggressive looking design and a very good looking wheel at that, you're also going to get a wider tire, which does stand to reason. It's a 245, 275 layout. It's also going to come with a summer tire and not the all seasons that we get standard here, or the same sort of all seasons you would get if you do go with that Ultra package. On this Prestige model, we also have the air suspension, and that gives us about 1.6 inches of total travel. That's going to be from the highest lift point, which is not meant to be driven around on, but if you have an exceptionally tall curb that you want to make sure you avoid instead of make contact with. And you can go ahead and lower it down, and it'll lower in 2 different ways. Basically, to dynamic or efficiency, and efficiency there being the lowest. Besides just being generally on board with EVs coming to market, I'm also excited what they've done with lighting, because there have been huge leaps in the world of lighting that seem to be almost directly tied with EVs and EV models. In this case, Audi isn't going big with their lighting, but they are still doing quite a bit with it. Instead of very, very large modules, everything is just really well built in. And if you get the S6 model, you can actually get OLED rear lighting that is much more customizable than even what we find here, which is still customizable within that screen. And one of my favorite pieces is actually going to be this Audi logo, which is illuminated in red and just really nicely implemented. The rest of the back is pretty simple. There's maybe a little bit more black plastic than I would like, especially down here in that lower bumper, but it's not in a space that you're going to scratch it loading in and out of the trunk area. But as far as the badging goes, again, a little bit more subdued. A6 over here, Quattro over here, no mention of e-tron. This just happens to be an A6 because that A6 nomenclature, all those even numbers are electric, all the odd numbers are still internal combustion, and that way we don't have to further differentiate themselves. They don't have to stand out and announce, hey, I'm electric. Though obviously the lack of tailpipes is going to be one indicator, even though we are starting to see that on more vehicles these days. Let's go ahead and get this back opened up. One of the things I like about a Sportback, not only the way that it looks, but that it provides a little bit more practicality, ease of loading, and in this case, a little bit more of a slippery design, so you get a little bit more range for the battery that's already on board. And when you open this up, you'll notice a two-piece cargo cover, so your privacy is there. One goes with the hatch, the other sticks with the car. Go ahead and remove that if you need to, but the space in here is pretty substantial, just about 26 cubic feet. These are both gonna be carry-on size luggage items, but there's plenty of room for them. And honestly, this space almost looks like it's made exclusively for some larger luggage, because it does end up being fairly tall and nice and deep. However, the closer you get to those seats, the more it ramps up a little bit, so it's not completely flat. And if you do fold those seats down, it continues to be sort of a two-stage load floor. If you fold those seats down though, you'll get just about 40 cubic feet of total capacity, which is pretty large, not as much though as we would get if there was the Avance version that we don't get here in the States, but does exist elsewhere. So Audi, if you're listening, maybe think about it. There's a little bit more storage to be found underneath the floor here, but not a lot. In this case, we have just enough for our mobile charging cord. We also have a tire remover kit, but not a tire to put in its place. No spare tire comes with this particular model, though we do have a fairly large subwoofer, at least as far as the packaging goes, not in the overall diameter. That is gonna add nicely to the sound system, but we'll cover more of that when we hop inside. Bear with me, but we're gonna go ahead and take a look at this infotainment system a little bit differently than normal. But one of the reasons is because it's so easy to use while you're driving. And actually a lot of that has to do with the voice commands, but I promise I will get there. What we have here in the infotainment screen is about 14.5 inches of screen real estate. And as I mentioned, we have about a 10.9 inch screen over here, just not one that I'm really able to access. I can see there's sort of a shape or design on it. I'm not really sure what it looks like on camera right now, but obviously it's not active and I don't have a passenger, so it wouldn't turn on anyway. Over here on the driver's side, we have an 11.9 inch screen. And that's a pretty customizable display. You can make it do just about whatever you want or really need it to. But in this instance, I don't need a whole lot of information on the screen in front of me because I have a bunch of information on the windshield. Because this has one of the most interactive and active and engaging heads-up displays that I have ever seen. And one of the most important features, because this is one that bugs the heck out of me, is that it is actually bright enough that you can use it when you have polarized sunglasses on. Because if it's a sunny day, I'm always wearing my polarized sunglasses, and what that really means is that heads-up displays are almost useless. In this case, it's not, and if you need to increase the brightness for it so that you can see it with your sunglasses on, it's a voice command away from dimming that. Hey Audi, dim the heads-up display to 30%.
Okay, I am setting the brightness to 30%.
And even at 30%, I can see it, not terribly well, obviously not as clearly, but it's still there. So this is a very advanced heads-up display. The only issue though is some of these animations might be a little bit too much for everybody. The good news is it's a voice command from turning off. Hey Audi, turn off the heads-up display. And what that really means is you don't have to spend any time engaging with that touchscreen if you don't want to. It has wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, but in this case, I haven't even connected my phone. I just didn't need to. I told the car where I wanted to go, started plugging in the route, and it also is going to be super helpful when you do plan on taking this farther because it'll go ahead and plan your charging stops for you as well. As much as I like the screen layout and the fact that it's curved towards you and nice and easy to reach, I have long arms, but I have plenty of reach over the screen if for some reason I needed to. But one thing I don't love as much is some of what happens below that. And a lot of that has to do with the material. What we have here is a lot of black plastic. In the A6 we were in a little bit earlier, it didn't have this carbon accenting piece that the S6 does. Instead, it had wood, which I absolutely loved. But the problem is that wood didn't carry on down to this center console area, it just stayed this black plastic. So as much as I want to give lots of credit to a car that is both technologically advanced and also feels like it has paid attention to what a lot of consumers like, which is not just different variety of materials, but also wood in their luxury cars. That absolutely should be what we have here. Instead, it's the black plastic, which looks nice for the moment, but that likely will not last very long. You have your controls here for start, stop, mostly something you're going to use for stop, because if you hop in and go to put this in drive, it's going to go ahead and turn the car on for you, at least so far in my experience. If you want to change your drive modes, that happens here in the drive select. The drive select will go ahead and engage the screen so you can see exactly which one you're selecting. 4 different drive modes: balance, dynamic, comfort, and efficiency, and they do all come with different characteristics. One issue though is a functional one. If I want to change the volume on the stereo, right now I've got 2 drinks in here and I have to go around them to get to that volume knob. It's not something that I would throw a big fit about, but it is a little bit annoying. Of course, I do have volume control here on the steering wheel, but there's none up here. It's just this spot down here, and you have to do a little bit of a crane operator situation. Now moving over to the steering wheel, this is a different shape than you'll get in the A6, but the actual internals of it are pretty much the same. So your button layouts are exactly where you would expect. In this case, your heated steering wheel is going to be located up here in the top right, and then the rest of these controls are a little bit interesting. For my volume knob, if I want to press it, I can go ahead and press it up and down, but I can also slide it. You can see there on the screen, it's going to go ahead and change my volume. I'm not sure if that's going to be somebody's preference or they're not going to be sure which one to use, but I actually do like that we have the option, though it's more shiny black plastic that in the long term I do expect will get a little bit scratched up. But behind the wheel is going to be 2 paddle shifters. They are not going to be shifting anything. They're going to be controls for your regenerative braking, but I appreciate they're in a form factor people are familiar with. On the left side, you'll find the high beam controls, but the lights are actually over here in the door, and then obviously your turn signals. Cruise control, that's tucked under here on the left. One downside though for this being an everyday sedan or an everyday driver is that there isn't a whole lot of extra room in here. I do like that the cockpit feels, well, close, but it doesn't seem to have tons of pockets or cubbies. I mean, this big spot here is mostly going to be just for your phone, and it's taking up the bottom of it, so I'm not going to put a bunch of stuff on it because my phone comes in and out of the car with me every time I get in and out. There is a bottle pocket there in the door, but you would have to go ahead and maneuver it. I'm not sure how easy it would be to get in and out while you are actually driving. Obviously, when you first hop in, shouldn't be an issue. And then there is a glove box, but it's not a terribly large one. It does, however, tell us the exact price of this model. Don't worry, we'll cover that at the end. Unfortunately for this trip, I don't get a ton of time with either the A6 or the S6, and I don't get a lot of time behind the wheel either. So if I'm going to spend some, I'm going to spend it in the S6, which we'll get to in just a moment. But while I'm cruising through Laguna Beach, let me go ahead and tell you a little bit more about what we know and what you can expect. And I guess while I'm talking, maybe some other cool cars will drive by or some occasional good beach views. But if you're going to spend a lot of time behind the wheel, then you want to know how far you can go with it. Every single model of the A6 and the S6 comes with the exact same battery pack. It's going to be 100 kilowatt hours, 94.4 of that is listed as usable, and your maximum range is going to be 392 miles. That's a pretty good range, but the problem with that range is there's some caveats, because that's with the Ultra package, which is an additional cost, $800. And that also means you're going to go from the 20-inch wheels down to the 19-inch wheels. And for me, it's not so much the specific wheel that's changing, it's about the tires as well. They're getting thinner, which means you're going to get more range, but also less grip. And that's probably one of the things you want in a vehicle like this, is some pretty good grip. I might be willing to sacrifice it, but you might not. So if you don't go with the Ultra package, that 390 some range is actually closer to 370. That's if you get the bigger tires and still all rear-wheel drive. If you want the all-wheel drive, where that's listed at 377, well, that Quattro, the good news, can get the Ultra package, but you also are going to lose range if you don't get the Ultra package. So that range goes from 377 down to 333. It's not a small loss, but it's still not a bad driving range. And then at the very top, just while we're here, the S6, well, the listed range there is for the 20-inch wheels, not the 21s. And honestly, at that point, if you're going to go with the S6, get the bigger, stickier, meatier tires and be willing to sacrifice only about 20 miles of range. It goes from 324 down to 302. So that's one I don't mind as much, but just while you're shopping, be aware of it. If you are really pushing that range, the good news is charging here is pretty quick, certainly not top of the line, but 270 kilowatts is what you'll be able to get at a DC charge station. If you're looking at charging at home, that one is a little bit seemingly unusually small. Instead of a standard 11.5, which is kind of what I think most people are going to have installed at their house, this is going to be a 9.6 level 2 charging. It's not going to be a big problem, but it seems like an easy spot to have matched a 48 amp EVSE, which to my mind are probably the more popular ones, or at least the ones people are benchmarking. And if they go below that, there's probably a limitation on their power draw at home, then that would be the only reason. That charging curve is going to drop after that, as do all EVs. That means if you don't need a full charge, and in most cases you don't unless you're doing a step-by-step trip, then you should be able to get as much as you need to get home in pretty short order. Now that the road has opened up at least just a little bit, let's talk about some power numbers, because the A6 comes in two different ways, a rear-wheel drive or a quattro version. And the quattro and the rear-wheel drive are actually using the same rear permanent magnet motor, it just adds an asynchronous motor up front if you go for quattro. Horsepower numbers for the rear-wheel drive come in about 375. If you go with that dual motor layout, you're looking at just over 450. But if none of that is quick enough to you, there is of course the S6, that's almost 100 horsepower more, coming in about 540. But in real-world driving, ultimately what does that mean? Well, it means pretty quick 0 to 60 times. The slowest you'll go in that rear-wheel drive should be about 5.2 seconds, 0 to 60. If you're looking for something a little bit quicker or better traction, don't worry, the dual motor will get you not just better traction, but also 0 to 60 in about 4.3 seconds, nearly a full second off. And if you go for the S6, which is exactly what we have here, that should get you 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds. And here's the thing. Those are all what I would call rather quick. But this isn't going to be a 10/10ths car. The S6 here is not an RS6. There actually currently is an RS6, but not the same really at all. Doesn't mean there won't be one down the road, and if you want electric performance from Audi, don't worry, there already is an e-tron GT, and there's an RS version of that GT, and that is going to be power on power on power, but not going to be as everyday friendly. Now, unfortunately, this is not the place where I can go ahead and stretch its legs. The good news, these should be available for us to drive at home in the not too distant future, in which case we'll tell you a whole lot more about it. But I can tell you that the Quattro I drove earlier today was plenty of power and rather comfortable, but it doesn't mean that it's like riding on a cloud. It is definitely geared towards a sporty ride rather than a incredibly plush ride. Even comfort mode, you can feel what's happening beneath you, but none of it's going to be too intrusive into the cabin or into this solar seat cushion. If you go with the S6, however, things are going to be dialed up a little bit further. Now let's talk about pricing, and while things have been a little bit tight on how much things are or are not going to cost, because these models are already available on sale right now, we do have that full pricing information, which means if you want to jump into an Audi A6 Sportback, it'll start at $67,195, and that's going to be for that rear-wheel drive trim, which means the lowest performance, but also the most accessible. And if you're looking for a fun-to-drive vehicle, I prefer rear-wheel drive over front-wheel drive, so good news, Audi has you there. If you want more range up to about that 390-mile mark, you're going to have to pay about an $800 option to get that Ultra package, which mostly is going to bump you down from a 20-inch wheel to a 19-inch wheel. But honestly, as long as that wheel combination works for you, something I might consider if you do some longer driving, because on those longer trips, especially those freeway speeds, that's where you'll start to see that advantage. And even though it seems a little bit strange to pay more for a smaller wheel, if that's what works for you, I appreciate that the option is there. But if what you're looking for isn't range and it's more performance, then you'll likely want to bump up to the Quattro model, and that means all-wheel drive and a small price bump, $69,195. And I do mean a small price bump because it's not an enormous leap from that one motor to a two motor configuration. You're also going to get increased performance. Where the rear-wheel drive is nice and quick, around 5.2, 5.3 seconds, 0 to 60, if you bump up to the Quattro, that's going to drop down into the 4s. More of the high 4s, but the 4s nonetheless. And that means bumping up off the line is going to be nice and quick. You'll have increased traction in those tough traction conditions, and you haven't had to pay a whole lot more for it. But if you want the most performance, then you're not looking at something with an A, you're looking with an S. That's going to be the Audi A6 Sportback, and that's going to start out at $79,995, and that means 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds, which is plenty quick, at least by my definition. But if you want all the amenities, that is going to bump up from there. Same thing with the A6 models, but your range on the S6 is going to be from that just under $80,000 up to about $88,300 and change, which is a pretty big jump, about an $8,000 price differential based on those trim packages. But what that really means is, and what I think Audi is most competing against, is that this is going to be set really nicely against some of its most direct competition. And the most head-to-head model is going to be the BMW i5. And that's because that i5 comes in a little bit more expensive, a little bit lower on performance until you get to the S model, the S6 versus something like the i5 M40. And it's also going to be a totally different design, where that BMW is a little bit more upright, it's a little bit more, now squat maybe isn't the right word, but it's a stronger edge line. This Audi is going for a sleek appearance, and honestly one that I really appreciate. So while it's not going to be the exact same experience, I will say that a little bit more performance is going to be had in the Audi and for a little bit less each and every time. Plus, you are going to get more range in that Audi. And for a lot of folks, range is still going to be a serious shopping consideration. So just know you get a little bit more when you pay a little bit less. But obviously the ownership experience and the time behind the wheel is going to feel different between those models. What's going to be a little bit out of the realm is going to be something like that Mercedes EQE sedan that comes in just about $10,000 more than you start out with this Audi. And that's still going to be a rear-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive, but obviously the Mercedes is going to have a different experience as well. I'm not sure how much direct cross-shopping you'll find there because I think it is a pretty different customer base. But the one that I'm most interested in, and I think what these vehicles are most directly competing against, is going to be sort of that benchmark setting vehicle in the Tesla Model S. But here's where Audi has a huge advantage. Where Tesla admittedly has quicker performance in their entry-level model, so their dual motor all-wheel drive, coming in the low 3 seconds, 0 to 60, meaning that it's far surpassing what we get over there on the Audi S6. It also means that it's going to be a significantly higher price point. But the good news is you do get more for that. Not just more performance, but also more driving range with over 400 miles of rated range. But you're going to pay almost $20,000 more just to get into that Model S. And I'll be honest, I don't think it's $20,000 more car. Very different ownership experience, very different environment there behind the wheel. Although that entry-level Model S does come with a standard wheel, not the yoke, that's going to be found up in the Plaid model, but that Plaid and this S6 are nowhere near competitors because the S6 is very quick. The Plaid model is ridiculous with a rated 0 to 60 time of under 2 seconds, 1.99 asterisk. That one comes with a yoke steering wheel, which is going to be very much love it or hate it, but it's not the same experience. And what I really like about this Audi offering is that it comes in at a reasonable price point. We can argue what that looks like, but compared to what you're shopping against, it means it's going to be one of the least expensive ways to hop into a luxury electric sedan, but it's not even a regular sedan. This one's a Sportback, which I appreciate in terms of styling, and I also appreciate in terms of everyday usability. I really do wish I'd had more time with the A6 and the X6 out on the road, but the time I did have just told me that I want more of it, which means that hopefully we can get it here either at my house or with Alex in the next few weeks or coming months so we can tell you a lot more about it. But what I can tell you is if this is a vehicle you're looking at moving on right now, this should be on your shopping list. But if this isn't what you go for, let me know what else it is you're shopping against, because those mainstream sedans are going to be, I think, the most direct competitors, but they certainly aren't the only things out there. And is the Sportback practical enough for you, or are you going to be looking towards something like a crossover because you do get a little bit more practicality there? Or is this really kind of the perfect blend and balance? As much as I would love to see an S6 Avant make it over here, I'm not going to hold my breath, but what is going to be interesting is when the S6 and the A6, which were really supposed to be electric only, comes in with a gasoline option. That ICE model is on its way over here. Audi has sort of reversed their thinking on that matter, where the even numbers were going to be electric. Now it's an even number, which is mostly electric plus that gas offering. So we'll see what that looks like. We don't have a ton more information at this point, but if you have questions about that, let us know down in the comment section as well. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed our coverage of the A6 and the S6. Again, if further questions, let us know down below. But if you want to hear more of us instead of just seeing us, you can go ahead and follow us on our podcast, the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast, which you can find here on YouTube. You can also find that wherever you listen to your podcasts, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. If you're more interested in electric vehicles, we have our electric channel, EV Buyer's Guide as well. And if you want to see more snapshots of what we're doing, you can find us on Facebook or Instagram. We're trying to work on those just a little bit more as well. Lots of vehicles to talk about and lots of ways to show it to you. Let us know what's most important to you. Until next time, we'll see you down the road.